A digital gold rush collided with old-fashioned greed. Welcome to the modern Gilded Age, where fortunes were not built on railroads or steel, but on pixels and promises. This is the wild world of art NFTs, a landscape where technological hype met human ambition and created a perfect storm for scandal. We are about to journey through the most shocking investment scandals in this digital art frontier. You will hear tales of anonymous founders vanishing with millions, of celebrities leading their fans into financial ruin, and of insider schemes that would make a robber baron nod in recognition. By the end, you will understand the breathtaking scale of deception that flourished when new money chased the next big thing. How did a simple digital image become a ticket to a multi-million-dollar heist? What happens when the promise of a virtual yacht club hides a very real trap? The stories we uncover reveal a timeless truth about speculation and trust. Are we any wiser now that the digital dust has settled? It all began with a simple yet revolutionary idea. What if you could own something that existed only online and prove beyond any doubt that it belonged to you? The answer arrived with the non-fungible token, or NFT. At its core, an NFT is a digital certificate of ownership, a unique piece of code stored on a public ledger called a blockchain. Think of it like the deed to a house, but for a digital file. This deed is permanent, transparent, and cannot be copied or forged. This technology, powered by smart contracts that automatically execute agreements, promised artists a new way to monetize their work and collectors a new frontier for investment. Suddenly, the internet was not just a place to view art. It was a place to own it, and the rush was on. A new generation of collectors, fluent in the language of memes and digital culture, saw a chance to be part of art history. Simultaneously, traditional investors from the world of finance, spotting the next speculative wave, poured in with their capital, seeking the digital equivalent of a blue chip stock. The cultural flashpoint came in March of 2021, when a digital artist known as Beeple sold a collage at the famed auction house Christie's for a staggering $69 million. That sale was a seismic event. It was not just a price tag, it was a signal flare. It announced to the world that digital art had arrived in the big leagues, validated by one of the oldest institutions in the traditional art market. Overnight, profile pictures of cartoon apes and pixelated punks were trading for hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. This was the new Gilded Age, playing out not in ballrooms and stock exchanges, but on computer screens and in Discord chat rooms. The parallels were uncanny. Just as industrial tycoons once used fine art to cement their new social status, crypto millionaires now used NFT collections to flaunt their wealth and belonging in this digital aristocracy. It was a classic speculative frenzy, a whirlwind of new money chasing the intoxicating promise of the next big thing. And as history teaches us, wherever there is a frenzied rush for new wealth, the conditions for scandal are never far behind. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the rules were still being written. Into this whirlwind of promise and profit stepped a mysterious figure known only as Evil Ape. His project was called Evolved Apes, a collection of 10,000 unique digital illustrations of muscular apes. The sales pitch was irresistible. Purchasing one of these ape NFTs was not just buying a piece of art. It was buying a ticket into an exclusive club with a grand future. Evil Ape promised an immersive online fighting game where these apes would be the main characters. He pledged substantial financial rewards from the project's treasury for the most dedicated holders. The community, buzzing on social media platforms, bought into the dream completely, pouring their cryptocurrency into the project. The collection sold out in a matter of days, raising the equivalent of $2.9 million. And then, silence. The website vanished. The social media accounts went dark. The promised game and rewards evaporated into the digital ether. Evil Ape, along with every single cent of that $2.9 million, had simply disappeared. This was a classic rug pull, a devastating scam named for the act of yanking a rug out from under someone. The scammer creates an enticing project, builds up immense hype and trust, collects all the investor funds, and then abruptly abandons the project, leaving the community with nothing but worthless digital files. The investors in Evolved Apes were not just disappointed. They were financially ruined. They were left holding JPEG images that were now completely devoid of utility or value. Their investment stolen by a phantom. The community, in a desperate and poignant display of solidarity, actually tried to salvage the project themselves. A group of holders took the original artwork and attempted to build a new, legitimate project from the ashes, but the damage was irreparable. The trust was gone, and the stolen capital was lost forever. The Evolved Apes scandal was a brutal wake-up call. It laid bare the terrifying risks hiding behind the exciting frontier of digital ownership. Here was the core vulnerability, the perfect storm of anonymity and unregulated space. Anyone could create a convincing online persona, make extravagant promises, and collect a fortune without ever revealing their real name or face. There were no background checks, no regulatory bodies to audit the project's finances, and no legal recourse for investors scattered across the globe. This case proved that in this new gilded age, the gilded facade could be painted over a trapdoor. It asked a painful question of every excited investor. How can you trust a future built by someone you can never truly see? Well, Evolved Apes showed how easy it was to vanish. The next scandal revealed that law enforcement was finally starting to look. Enter Frosties, a charming collection of 10,000 smiling, ice cream-themed cartoon characters. The artwork was cute, the community was enthusiastic, and the roadmap promised a sweet future filled with merchandise, token rewards, and even an animated series. Investors minted their Frosties, pouring in over $1.1 million worth of cryptocurrency. The project sold out in under an hour, and then, just like that, the warmth vanished. The founders pulled the rug, shutting down the website and their social media, leaving the Frosties community out in the cold with nothing but melted dreams. It was a painfully familiar story, but this one had a chilling new ending. This time, the anonymous founders did not get away. In a landmark moment for the entire digital asset space, federal authorities in New York announced the arrest of 2 individuals behind the Frosties scam. The shocking part, they were not shadowy international hackers. They were 2 teenagers, aged 20 and 21. The Department of Justice unsealed charges of wire fraud and money laundering conspiracy against them, marking one of the very first federal prosecutions specifically for an NFT rug pull scheme. This case sent seismic waves through the ecosystem. For the first time, the abstract fear of online theft collided with the concrete reality of handcuffs in a federal indictment. The narrative was jarring. These were not grizzled financial criminals from Wall Street, but digital natives who grew up online, understood internet culture intimately, and weaponized that knowledge to exploit their own generation's hunger for belonging and profit. They had mastered the art of the hype cycle, the community management, and the technical setup, only to use those skills for fraud. The Frosties' arrests were a powerful signal. To potential scammers, it was a warning that the perceived lawlessness of the crypto world had limits, and that anonymity on the internet was not absolute. To defrauded investors, it offered a fragile glimmer of hope that there could be accountability. And to regulators watching from the sidelines, it established a crucial legal precedent, proving that existing laws against fraud could indeed be applied to these novel, purely digital schemes. The message was clear. The new Gilded Age might be digital, but the old rules of justice could still find you, even if you were just a teenager with a clever idea and a stolen fortune. But the scandals were not confined to shadowy, anonymous projects. The rot appeared to reach the very heart of the establishment. If the Bored Ape Yacht Club was the Sotheby's of this new world, a blue-chip collection whose membership signaled elite status, then OpenSea was the New York Stock Exchange, the dominant marketplace where billions of dollars in trades occurred. It was here that a scandal erupted which felt hauntingly familiar to traditional finance: insider trading. The allegations centered on a former OpenSea employee, a product manager named Nathaniel Chastain. His role gave him a critical advantage. He knew in advance which NFTs would be featured on OpenSea's coveted front page, a placement virtually guaranteed to cause their value to surge. Prosecutors claimed Chastain abused this confidential knowledge. Using anonymous digital wallets, he would quietly purchase dozens of those soon-to-be featured NFTs just before they were highlighted. Once the front page promotion went live and the prices exploded, he would swiftly sell them for a substantial profit. He then allegedly funneled the illicit gains through more cryptocurrency transactions in an attempt to hide his identity. This was not a rug pull, but a sophisticated betrayal of trust from within the system itself. The concept was simple: using non-public information for personal gain, but its execution in the decentralized, pseudonymous world of crypto made it a landmark case. The community's outrage was profound. This was not an external hacker or a fake project founder. This was an insider at the most trusted platform, exploiting the very mechanisms meant to promote discovery and growth. It shattered the illusion that decentralized markets were inherently more pure or resistant to the classic corruptions of Wall Street. The legal fallout was swift and significant. Nathaniel Chastain was convicted of wire fraud and money laundering, becoming the first person ever convicted at trial for insider trading in the NFT space. The case forced a painful reckoning. If this could happen at OpenSea, where else was it happening? The scandal exposed a fundamental tension in the burgeoning industry: the clash between the decentralized, trustless ethos of blockchain and the very human, centralized points of failure within the companies built on top of it. OpenSea's reputation was tarnished. and the entire ecosystem was left asking a difficult question. How can you build a new financial world when the old sins have already found a way in? The promise of insider trading at the highest levels was chilling, but the next case proved the scams could be even more brazen and global in scale. It involved a project called Mutant Ape Planet, a name deliberately chosen to evoke the prestige of the wildly successful Bored Ape Yacht Club. Its founder, a French national using the online alias Reeve, launched the collection with a familiar and enticing roadmap. He promised his investors exclusive merchandise, token rewards, community events, and even a dedicated metaverse land for holders. Relying on this vision, collectors invested heavily, minting all 10,000 of the ape NFTs and pouring roughly $3 million into the project's treasury. Then, within days of the sellout, Reeve executed the rug pull. He deleted the project's website and social channels, transferred the entire $3 million out of the project's wallet, and vanished, leaving his community with worthless digital images and broken promises. This time, however, the disappearance was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of an international manhunt. The United States Department of Justice, having set a precedent with the Frosties case, launched a full investigation. They traced the stolen funds through the blockchain, following the digital footprints left by the cryptocurrency as it moved between various wallets and exchanges. This process, known as blockchain analytics, is like having a permanent public ledger for every transaction. While wallet owners can be pseudonymous, the movement of funds is entirely transparent. Investigators use this transparency to map how Reeve attempted to launder the money, moving it through different services in an effort to obscure its origin and cash out. Their digital trail led them across the Atlantic. In a dramatic operation, Moroccan authorities, acting on a request from the U.S., arrested the 24-year-old French founder at the Marrakech airport. He was charged with wire fraud and money laundering conspiracy, facing up to 40 years in prison. The Mutant Ape Planet case painted a vivid picture of a new kind of financial crime scene, one that was borderless and digital, yet increasingly traceable. The scammer operated from Europe, defrauded investors likely scattered across the globe, and was apprehended in Africa for crimes prosecuted in America. It was the digital Wild West, but with a new sheriff learning to read the tracks. This international takedown sent an even stronger message than the Frosties arrests. It demonstrated that law enforcement agencies were not only willing to pursue these cases, but were also developing the specialized skills to track stolen crypto assets across the international financial system. The blockchain's permanence, once a shield for criminals, was becoming a tool for investigators. For a moment, it seemed the tide might be turning, that the age of consequence was dawning in the digital art world. But then, the most influential figures of all entered the arena, and the rules of the game seemed to change once more. While law enforcement chased anonymous founders, the most powerful hype machines in the world were already operating in plain sight. Celebrities and influencers, with their massive, trusting audiences, stepped onto the NFT stage, and their involvement created some of the most heartbreaking losses of all. No case illustrates this more clearly than the spectacular rise and fall of CryptoZoo, a project championed by one of the internet's biggest stars, Jake Paul. The promise was intoxicating. Paul promoted Crypto Zoo not just as another NFT collection, but as a complete ecosystem, a play-to-earn video game where players could buy, sell, breed, and trade exotic animal NFTs. The digital creatures would produce their own cryptocurrency eggs, which holders could then hatch or sell for real profit. It was pitched as a fun, engaging game that could also be a serious source of income. For Paul's legion of fans, many of them young and new to investing, this was a dream scenario. Their favorite creator was not just endorsing a product. He was inviting them into an exciting new world he helped build. They trusted him. That trust translated into massive investment. Reports suggest the project generated at least $40 million from eager participants buying the zoo token and the animal NFTs needed to play the promised game. But the dream quickly curdled. The game, which was the entire core of the project, never functionally materialized. What was released was a buggy, bare-bones interface that bore no resemblance to the vibrant, interactive experience that had been advertised. The animal NFTs, purchased at a premium, were essentially useless digital images with no game to use them in. The cryptocurrency eggs they were supposed to produce were often impossible to claim or sell. The entire project froze, leaving investors stranded with assets that had no utility and plummeting value. An investigative journalist named CoffeeZilla published a devastating multi-part series, labeling Crypto Zoo an outright scam. He detailed allegations of the founders cashing out millions early, of abandoned developers, and of a project structure that seemed designed to take money rather than build a game. The legal pressure mounted. A class action lawsuit was filed against Jake Paul and other promoters, accusing them of engaging in a fraudulent scheme and violating securities laws. The lawsuit argued that Paul used his fame to create a false sense of legitimacy and urgency, driving his followers to invest in a product that he allegedly knew, or should have known, was fundamentally flawed. For the investors, mostly everyday fans, the loss was more than financial. It was a betrayal of their loyalty. They had followed a celebrity into a new frontier, only to be left holding the bag. The Crypto Zoo scandal exposed the dark side of influencer marketing in unregulated spaces. A celebrity's smile and enthusiasm could bypass critical thinking, making a complex financial product seem like a sure bet from a friend. It taught a brutal lesson in the new Gilded Age. A famous face could be the most convincing gilding of all, masking a hollow core. It forced a difficult question when the music stops in a speculative frenzy. Who is left without a chair? Often, it is not the influencers on stage, but the audience who believed in them. The line between inspiration and theft can be dangerously thin in a digital world. While Crypto Zoo dealt with broken promises, a different kind of scandal erupted around one of music's most iconic figures, Snoop Dogg. The rapper, a well-known and influential NFT collector, himself under the pseudonym Kazomo de Medici, launched his own collection titled A Journey with the Dog. Instead of celebration, the release was met with immediate and fierce backlash from the digital art community. Artists and observers quickly noticed that many of the cartoonish avatars in Snoop's collection bore a striking, and in some cases near identical, resemblance to existing character designs from a popular stock media website. These were not just similar styles. They appeared to be direct, traceable copies of pre-made digital assets, slightly modified and then minted as expensive, limited edition NFTs. The accusation was not fraud in the financial sense, but something that cut to the very heart of the NFT movement's stated values: artistic theft. The community's outrage was profound. For years, proponents had argued that NFTs finally gave digital artists true ownership and a way to monetize their original work. Here was a celebrity, someone with immense resources, seemingly taking cheap, generic artwork, attaching his famous name to it, and selling it for a premium. It sparked a furious debate over authenticity and integrity. If the unique digital certificate, the NFT, was tied to artwork that was itself not unique or originally created for the project, what was anyone really buying? Was it just the celebrity name, a digital autograph on a copied image? Snoop Dogg's creative team eventually responded, stating the artwork was intended as an homage and that the core value of the collection was in the music and experiences tied to each token, not solely the visual. This explanation did little to calm the critics. For many artists, it felt like a hollow excuse, a way to gloss over the lack of original creation. The Snoop Dogg controversy became a scandal of values. It highlighted a painful tension within the NFT ecosystem. On one side, there were artists and purists who saw the technology as a revolutionary tool for creative empowerment. On the other, there were opportunists and celebrities who saw it as just another merchandising channel, where the hype and the name mattered more than the artistic labor. This case forced collectors to ask a very uncomfortable question. When you purchase an NFT, are you investing in art, or are you simply purchasing a branded receipt? The promise of a new, fairer creative economy seemed to waver when the old patterns of power and appropriation simply repackaged themselves for the blockchain. Perhaps the most morally bankrupt scheme of all involved not just stealing money, but weaponizing collective memory. The project called itself Stars of David, and it presented a simple, powerful premise. It would offer 10,000 unique NFTs, each one a digital artwork featuring the Star of David, a profound symbol of Jewish identity and resilience. The founders promised that a significant portion of the proceeds, 25%, would be donated directly to organizations dedicated to Holocaust education. For many potential buyers, this was not merely an investment. It was a meaningful contribution, a way to honor history and support vital remembrance work through a modern medium. The project leveraged this powerful emotional appeal, attracting investors who believed they were participating in something with both cultural and philanthropic weight. The collection launched, and it sold out swiftly, raising approximately $1.3 million. Then, the promises evaporated. The donations to Holocaust education charities never materialized. The project's official communication channels went silent. The founders, who had operated under pseudonyms, vanished entirely, taking the entire treasury with them. This was not just a rug pull. It was a profound betrayal that exploited sacred symbols and historical trauma for pure, cynical profit. The backlash from both the Jewish community and the wider NFT space was immediate and fierce. People felt a deep sense of violation, that their heritage and the memory of immense suffering had been used as a marketing gimmick to facilitate a theft. The scandal laid bare a chilling evolution in scam tactics, moving beyond fake video games and insider trading into the realm of cultural exploitation. The anonymous creators had calculated that attaching their scheme to a cause would disarm skepticism and accelerate trust, making the eventual theft even more devastating. It raised a disturbing question. In a digital landscape where identity is fluid, what stops bad actors from appropriating any symbol of faith, struggle, or community to line their own pockets? The stars of David Heist remains, as of now, an unsolved mystery. The founders have not been publicly identified or apprehended, leaving a community not only out of pocket, but deeply wounded by the experience. This case stands as a stark monument to the absolute lowest point the NFT mania could reach, where the hunger for profit showed no reverence for history itself. After such a breach of trust, one has to wonder, could anything possibly rebuild it? The exploitation of trust reached its most cynical form in cultural theft, but another scandal revealed how easily hype could be weaponized for a classic financial trap. This time, the spotlight fell on the world of professional sports and a rising NBA star, LaMelo Ball. His foray into the NFT space was highly anticipated, launching a collection called One of One Melo. The concept centered on digital trading cards and unique experiences tied to the athlete, marketed as a way for fans to own a piece of his journey. The initial sale appeared to be a massive success, with certain NFTs selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the celebration was short-lived. Almost immediately, members of the crypto community began raising alarm bells, accusing the team behind the project of orchestrating a sophisticated pump and dump scheme. This age-old market manipulation tactic works by artificially inflating or pumping the price of an asset through coordinated hype and misleading statements, creating a frenzy of buying. Once the price is driven to an artificial peak, the orchestrators sell off or dump their entire holdings at a massive profit. The sudden sell-off collapses the price, leaving everyone who bought in during the hype holding assets that are now worth a fraction of what they paid. In the case of the Melo NFTs, on-chain analysts pointed to suspicious trading patterns. They observed that a small cluster of digital wallets, believed to be controlled by insiders or the project's own treasury, were responsible for a large volume of the initial high-value sales. These were not typical fan purchases, but trades that appeared designed to create a false impression of immense demand and establish a wildly inflated price floor. The public data on the blockchain showed these insider wallets selling NFTs to each other at ever higher prices, a tactic known as wash trading. To an outside observer checking the marketplace, it looked like a feeding frenzy, with the asset's value skyrocketing. This fabricated momentum drew in genuine fans and speculative investors, all believing they were getting in on a hot commodity backed by a celebrity. Once enough external money had entered the market, the evidence suggests the insider wallets executed the dump, flooding the market with their holdings and cashing out at the peak. The result was catastrophic for later buyers. The floor price of the NFTs plummeted, in some cases by over 90%, wiping out investments almost overnight. The community felt betrayed, arguing that LaMelo Ball's fame and his team's promotional power had been used not to build a lasting project, but to execute a quick, profitable exit at their expense. This controversy forced a difficult conversation about the blurred line between aggressive celebrity marketing and outright market manipulation. When a famous athlete promotes his own digital asset, where does enthusiastic branding end and a deceptive pump begin? The project's defenders argued it was simply volatile market behavior, but the coordinated on-chain activity painted a different picture. It highlighted a critical vulnerability in the NFT space: the power of a celebrity's influence to short-circuit rational investment decisions. Fans, eager to support their idol and fearful of missing out, often rush in without scrutinizing the underlying trading activity. The Milo case became a textbook example of how the traditional trappings of success, a famous name and a slick launch, could be harnessed to run a very old scam on a very new stage. It proved that even when the founder's identity is known and celebrated, the potential for exploitation remains, hidden not in anonymity, but in the overwhelming force of their own spotlight. The most devastating schemes were not content with simple theft. They aimed for the very architecture of trust itself. This brings us to the catastrophic collapse of Anubis DAO, a scam that fused the speculative energy of NFTs with the complex machinery of decentralized finance, or DeFi, to orchestrate a $60 million heist in a single hour. Anubis DAO presented itself as the future of collective investment, a decentralized autonomous organization. The concept was powerful: a community-run venture fund where members would pool their cryptocurrency to invest in promising NFT projects and other digital assets. Governance would be democratic, with token holders voting on decisions. Their first major initiative was a liquidity pool, a common DeFi tool where investors lock up funds to facilitate trading on a marketplace, earning fees in return. To participate, you needed to purchase the project's own token, Anubis. The launch was a frenzy. Lured by the promise of high yields and a stake in a democratized fund, investors poured in a breathtaking $60 million worth of Ethereum cryptocurrency. The funds flooded into the project's digital wallet, and then, in the space of minutes, they flooded right back out. The anonymous founders executed what is known as a liquidity rug pull. They used their control of the smart contracts backend to drain every single cent from that pool, transferring the entire $60 million to a private wallet before disappearing into the digital ether. The Anubis token, which moments before had real financial backing, became utterly worthless, its value crashing to zero. This was not just stealing money. It was sabotaging the very engine that gave that money its purpose. The sophistication was chilling. The scam exploited two of crypto's most hyped innovations simultaneously. It used the communal, forward-looking language of DAOs to create a facade of legitimacy and shared purpose. Then it leveraged the intricate, automated systems of DeFi to not only collect funds, but to vaporize them from within the mechanism designed to protect them. For the victims, the betrayal was twofold. They lost their investment, but they also saw a promising model for collective financial action revealed as a perfect trap. Prosecuting such a crime presented a maze of challenges. The founders were completely anonymous, known only by online handles. The DAO itself was not a legal entity in any country. but a piece of code with no address or board of directors. The theft was borderless, the victims globally dispersed, and the assets were instantly laundered through a maze of blockchain transactions. Who do you charge? Where do you file the case? The Anubis Dio heist represented a next-level threat, a fraud built from the very tools meant to decentralize power and eliminate middlemen. It proved that in this new Gilded Age, the most dangerous robber barons might not be individuals at all, but cleverly written lines of code executing a theft on a global scale, leaving behind nothing but a digital ghost town and a $60 million question. How do you govern a world designed to be governance-proof? Even the most prestigious vaults are not immune to a cleverly forged key. For the elite members of the Bored Ape Yacht Club, the ultimate status symbol became the ultimate target in a devastating security breach. This was not a rug pull or an insider trade, but a direct digital heist. Hackers executed a sophisticated phishing attack, tricking ape owners into surrendering access to their own priceless digital wallets. The method was deceptively simple and terrifyingly effective. It likely began with a seemingly legitimate link, perhaps appearing in a trusted Discord server or as a reply from a fake customer support account. A single click could have led to a convincing but fraudulent website designed to harvest login credentials, or it may have triggered the installation of malware that silently stole private keys, the cryptographic passwords that prove ownership of digital assets. Once the hackers had those keys, they had absolute control. They swept through the compromised wallets, transferring out some of the most valuable ape NFTs in existence, along with other prized digital collectibles. In a matter of minutes, they stole assets worth an estimated $3 million. The community's reaction was instant panic, spreading across social media as victims watched, helpless, as their prized digital possessions vanished from their wallets and reappeared in the hands of a thief. The horror was compounded by a fundamental, immutable truth of the blockchain. Once a transaction is confirmed, it cannot be reversed. There is no bank to call, no fraud department to issue a chargeback. The stolen ape was now legally, permanently, and undeniably owned by the hacker's wallet address, a string of code for all the world to see. This created a bizarre and frustrating marketplace reality. The stolen apes often resurfaced for sale almost immediately on secondary markets. Other collectors, seeing a rare ape listed at a suspiciously low price, would face a moral dilemma: snap up a bargain knowing it was stolen, or avoid it and let the hacker profit. This breach forced a painful reckoning about personal responsibility in a decentralized world. The promise of being your own bank came with the peril of being your own security guard. In the aftermath, the mantra "not your keys, not your crypto" took on a grim new meaning. Your keys could be stolen, and then your crypto was truly gone forever. The lasting impact was a cultural shift toward extreme caution. Hardware wallets, physical devices that store keys offline, became non-negotiable for serious collectors. The community grew wary of every link, every direct message, every too good to be true offer. The Great Ape Hack taught a brutal lesson. In the new Gilded Age, your fortune was only as secure as your most careless click. It revealed that the greatest threat to a digital fortune might not be a flawed investment, but a moment of human error in a system designed to forget no mistakes. Theft could be executed with code, but failure required only a staggering lack of competence. This brings us to the saga of Pixelman, a project that managed to lose $70 million not to hackers, but to its own breathtaking inadequacy. It began with a classic and compelling pitch. Pixelman promised to be the next great evolution in gaming, a massive, open-world online adventure built on the blockchain. Players would buy NFTs of unique pixel art monsters, which would then serve as their characters in this immersive digital universe. The concept tapped directly into the nostalgia for beloved monster collecting games, combined with the modern allure of true digital ownership and play-to-earn economics. The vision was grand, the hype was immense, and investors, believing they were funding the future, poured in a staggering $70 million during the initial NFT sale. The community buzzed with anticipation, waiting to see the incredible game world their investment was building. Then came the moment known simply as the reveal. The developers released a first look at the actual in-game models of the Pixelman creatures. The reaction was not excitement, but utter disbelief. The artwork was shockingly, almost comically bad. The models were crude, poorly textured, and bore little resemblance to the charming pixel art used to sell the NFTs. One creature in particular, a blue, bipedal monster with awkwardly splayed limbs and a vacant expression, became an instant internet legend. The community christened it Kevin. Kevin was not fearsome or cool. He was a symbol of catastrophic failure, a meme that captured the vast chasm between the $70 million promise and the laughably amateurish reality. This was a different kind of scandal. It was not a rug pull where founders vanished with the cash. The Pixelman team remained, attempting to explain and rebuild. This was a scandal of epic, negligent overpromising. The developers had raised an amount of money comparable to a major studio's game budget, and the best they could show for it was Kevin. The funds appeared to have been wildly misallocated, spent on marketing and hype, rather than on competent artists, designers, or engineers. The legal implications here entered a profound gray area. Investors had not bought simple profile pictures. They had bought a promise of future utility, a ticket to a game that was supposed to exist. When that utility proved to be a hollow joke, was it fraud, or was it just a spectacularly bad business venture? The line was dangerously blurry. Unlike an outright theft, where intent is clear, this case asked whether gross incompetence and reckless misrepresentation could be just as damaging as malicious theft. The fallout was a slow-motion train wreck of broken trust. The value of the Pixelman NFTs collapsed. The project became a cautionary tale whispered across every crypto forum, a shorthand for the risk of buying visions instead of products. Kevin's pathetic grin served as a permanent reminder that in this new gilded age, a golden promise could be backed by nothing more than 10 plated dreams. It forced every investor to wonder, when you fund a future that exists only in a roadmap, what are you really holding? The line between inspiration and outright theft grew even more tangled with the case of the squiggles. This project presented itself as a charming, minimalist collection of colorful, wavy lines, a generative set where each unique squiggle promised a sense of playful abstraction. It found quick popularity, a fresh aesthetic in a space crowded with apes and punks. But that popularity soon curdled into controversy when a digital artist named Devin L. Kurtz stepped forward with a powerful accusation. She claimed the entire Squiggles collection was a direct, algorithmic copy of her own long-running personal art series, which she called her doodles. For years, she had been sharing these simple, expressive, squiggly line drawings across her social media, developing a distinct and recognizable style. The evidence she presented was damning. Side-by-side comparisons showed the NFT squiggles were not just similar in concept. They appeared to be near identical in form, color palette, and composition to her original work. This was not a case of stock asset theft, but of style and signature being fed into an algorithm to mass-produce derivatives without credit, permission, or compensation. The public call-out ignited a firestorm. The NFT community, which often champions artist rights, found itself deeply divided. One side rallied behind Kurtz, outraged that an independent artist's lifelong creative exploration could be scraped, tokenized, and sold by strangers. The other side defended the Squiggles founders, arguing that a simple squiggle is not something one can copyright, that it was a basic shape, and that all art is in some way derivative. The debate raged across Twitter and Discord, a messy public trial of aesthetics and ethics. The legal threats began to fly. Kurtz consulted lawyers, exploring her options for copyright infringement, while the Squiggles team faced the looming specter of a costly lawsuit that could doom their project entirely. The founders' responses did little to quell the anger. They initially claimed their work was original, then suggested it was merely inspired by a common visual language, a stance that many saw as a deflection from the specific, personal similarities to Kurtz's portfolio. The Squiggles saga became a perfect lens to examine the epidemic of plagiarism in generative NFT art. Generative projects work by creating thousands of unique images from a set of programmed traits, like different backgrounds, accessories, and facial features. The process relies on a foundational art library, and the ethical catastrophe occurs when that library is built with stolen or unlicensed artwork. An artist's unique style can be decomposed into data points, their life work reduced to a set of parameters for a profit-making machine. This case highlighted the cruel irony. A technology touted for empowering creators was being used to disempower one. The legal landscape here is a murky swamp. Copyright law struggles to keep pace with digital remix culture. How do you protect a style, a vibe, a feeling? When does homage become theft, especially when executed through code rather than a human hand? The Squiggles controversy tested these boundaries in real time, forcing everyone to ask where the ethical line truly was. Is it enough to simply be inspired? Or does the scale and commercial intent of the copying create a new moral obligation? The community revolt showed that beyond the courts of law, there is a powerful court of public opinion in this new world, and its verdict on authenticity can be just as final. The teenage architects of the Frosties rug pull learned their fate in a Manhattan courtroom. In a landmark ruling that sent shockwaves through the digital asset world, the two young men, now aged 21 and 22, were sentenced for their roles in the $1.1 million scheme. The judge handed down significant prison terms, with the mastermind receiving a sentence of 1 year and 1 day in federal prison, and his accomplice receiving 8 months. But the consequences extended far beyond incarceration. The court also ordered the pair to pay full restitution to their victims, a sum totaling over $1.3 million to account for the stolen funds and additional losses. Perhaps most telling was the judge's stern commentary during sentencing. He framed the crime not as a harmless digital prank or a victimless tech experiment, but as a serious financial crime with real human impact. He emphasized that the anonymity of the internet and the novelty of the technology were not shields against the law, stating that fraud is fraud, whether it is committed with a pen, a stock trade, or a line of code. This judicial stance was a powerful declaration that the justice system was prepared to treat these digital heists with the gravity they deserve. The legal arguments presented by prosecutors had successfully painted a clear picture. The founders knowingly fabricated a detailed roadmap for a project they never intended to build, used social media to stoke artificial hype, and then executed a premeditated theft by vanishing with the treasury. This established a straightforward narrative of wire fraud that a jury could understand, bypassing the complex technical jargon of blockchain to focus on the timeless act of lying to take people's money. For other anonymous operators considering a rug pull, the Frosties' sentencing was a cold splash of reality. It proved that federal investigators could and would follow the money trail on the blockchain, pierce the veil of online pseudonyms, and secure convictions. The threat of years in prison and a lifelong restitution order suddenly became a tangible risk calculus. But is fear of prosecution a truly effective deterrent in a space built on anonymity? The answer is nuanced. For sophisticated, large-scale operators who move with surgical precision and launder funds through complex, cross-border crypto mixers, the risk may still seem manageable. They bet on the sheer volume of scams overwhelming law enforcement's resources. However, for the vast majority of opportunistic fraudsters, the amateurs and the copycats who fueled the NFT scam epidemic, the Frosties case serves as a stark warning sign. It demonstrates that the lowest hanging fruit will be picked, and that the Department of Justice is actively building a playbook for these prosecutions. The sentencing did not end fraud, but it likely raised the barrier to entry, pushing would-be scammers toward more sophisticated methods or scaring off the casually dishonest. It created a precedent that victims could point to, a sliver of hope that accountability was possible. In the grand narrative of this digital gilded age, the Frosties' fallout marked a pivotal chapter, the moment the new frontier's lawlessness began to meet the old world's gavel. The mechanics of the insider trading scheme were a masterclass in exploiting the very transparency of the system. Nathaniel Chastain's position as a product manager at OpenSea gave him a critical, non-public view. He had advanced knowledge of which specific NFTs would be featured on the marketplace's coveted front page, a spot that functioned like a digital billboard in Times Square. This featuring almost guaranteed a surge in attention and a corresponding spike in price. Prosecutors alleged he turned this confidential information into a personal trading strategy. To hide his identity, he did not use his own public, named crypto wallet. Instead, he created and operated multiple anonymous digital wallets, essentially secret online bank accounts. The on-chain evidence, visible to anyone who knew where to look, painted a damning pattern. Just hours before an NFT collection was officially announced as featured, one of these anonymous wallets would purchase dozens of NFTs from that exact collection. The purchases were not random. They were precise, targeting assets about to receive a massive promotional windfall. Once the front page promotion went live and the market reacted, sending prices soaring, the same anonymous wall, it would swiftly sell the recently acquired NFTs, pocketing the profit. He then allegedly engaged in a practice called chain hopping, moving the illicit cryptocurrency gains through multiple transactions in different wallets in an attempt to muddy the digital trail. This was not a sophisticated technological hack. It was a simple human abuse of trust, executed with the tools of a new age. The case was built by following the immutable breadcrumbs left on the Ethereum blockchain. Investigators from the Department of Justice, working with blockchain analytics firms, correlated the timing of internal OpenSea communications with the suspicious trading activity from the anonymous wallets. By tracing the eventual flow of funds, they were able to link those anonymous wallets back to Chastain, allegedly catching him in the act of cashing out some of the profits through his public, identifiable accounts. The internal fallout at OpenSea was immediate and severe. The company overhauled its policies, explicitly banning employees from using confidential information to trade NFTs, and they implemented stricter rules about investing in collections that used the platform. They also revamped their feature selection process to reduce the risk of any single employee having unilateral control over such market-moving decisions. Yet, this scandal sparked a deeper, more philosophical debate. Can a decentralized platform, or any platform built in this space, ever truly eliminate the inherent advantage of insider information? The very nature of a company like OpenSea means there will always be employees with early knowledge of partnerships, promotions, or technical developments. This creates a fundamental information asymmetry, a gap between what the insiders know and what the public knows, which is the classic breeding ground for market abuse. The promise of Web3 and decentralization is a system where trust is not placed in individuals or corporations, but in code. But as long as human beings are needed to build, manage, and promote these platforms, they remain points of centralization and potential failure. The Bored Ape insider trading case proved that the old ghosts of Wall Street had not been exorcised. They had simply learned to haunt a new digital exchange. It forced a sobering question. If you cannot remove the human element, can you ever build a market that is truly fair? The celebrity NFT phenomenon quickly revealed itself to be a pattern, not an isolated incident. Beyond the high-profile implosion of Crypto Zoo, a string of other famous faces became entangled in projects that promised the moon and delivered little more than a crater. Paris Hilton, an early and vocal crypto enthusiast, promoted her own collection and appeared in promotional material for other projects. Boxing legend Floyd Mayweather famously promoted the Centratech ICO, a fraudulent cryptocurrency scheme that later led to criminal convictions for its founders. DJ and producer Steve Aoki launched his own Aoki collection, which saw its value plummet precipitously after the initial hype faded. The pattern was distressingly familiar. A celebrity's massive social media reach would ignite a firestorm of interest. Prices would skyrocket on pure hype. And then, once the celebrity's promotional duties seemed to end, the project would stagnate or collapse. For the fans who bought in, it felt like being invited to an exclusive party, only to watch the host leave through the back door. This recurring cycle fueled widespread allegations of a modern pump and dump scheme facilitated by fame. The mechanics were straightforward, if cynical. A celebrity's endorsement acted as the ultimate pump, injecting instant credibility and triggering a fear of missing out frenzy among their followers. This artificial demand would drive the price of the NFT or associated token to unsustainable heights. While the celebrity may not have been the one directly executing the sell-off, their promotion often benefited the anonymous developers who could then dump their holdings at the peak, leaving the community holding devalued assets. The ethical gray area here is vast. Is a celebrity merely sharing a new interest with their fans, or are they acting as an unlicensed financial promoter, steering their audience into a highly speculative, unregulated investment? Many of these stars received substantial upfront payments or were given large allocations of the project's tokens for free, creating a direct financial incentive to talk up the asset regardless of its long-term viability. Their loyalty, it seemed, was to the launch, not to the community that formed because of them. This pattern has not gone unnoticed by regulators. The United States Securities and Exchange Commission has begun to sharpen its focus on celebrity crypto endorsements, viewing them through the lens of securities law. The key legal question is whether these promoted NFTs constitute investment contracts. If buyers were led to expect profits primarily from the efforts of the promoters and developers, then the asset could be classified as a security. Promoting an unregistered security is a serious violation. The SEC has already settled charges with several celebrities, including Kim Kardashian, for touting a cryptocurrency token without disclosing the payment they received for the promotion. This regulatory scrutiny is a direct response to the power imbalance at play. A fan's trust in a celebrity is profound and personal, and when that trust is leveraged to drive financial decisions in a Wild West market, the potential for harm is immense. The law is slowly beginning to demand that famous influencers offer the same transparency as a financial advisor, a notion that clashes with the casual, hype-driven culture of social media promotion. It forces a difficult accountability, asking whether a famous face should bear some responsibility for the financial ruins left in the wake of their promotional tweet. While celebrities faced backlash for their promotional stumbles, the world's most hallowed cultural institutions were not immune to the siren call of digital gold. Museums and auction houses, the centuries-old pillars of the art establishment, cautiously stepped onto the NFT stage, only to find themselves embroiled in a series of high-profile fiascos that exposed a deep cultural rift. The first major scandal erupted not over a sale, but over a perceived betrayal of public trust. A prestigious European museum, home to masterpieces by artists who had been dead for centuries, announced it would mint and sell NFTs of high-resolution scans from its collection. The works themselves were firmly in the public domain, freely available for anyone to view and use. The museum's plan was to offer these digital tokens as a new form of patronage, a way for supporters to own a certified piece of art history while funding future conservation efforts. The backlash from the digital art community and the public was swift and furious. Critics accuse the institution of attempting to privatize and commodify humanity's shared cultural heritage. The core argument was devastatingly simple. These artworks belong to everyone. By creating limited edition, sellable NFTs of public domain scans, the museum was inventing artificial scarcity for something inherently abundant, leveraging its brand to sell digital certificates for images anyone could rightfully download with a click. The controversy highlighted a fundamental misunderstanding. The museum, steeped in a tradition of physical rarity and provenance, viewed the NFT as a modern-day limited edition print. The crypto-native community, however, saw it as a cynical cash grab that misunderstood the very point of blockchain-based art, which was meant to empower living artists, not gatekeep the past. The museum was forced into a humiliating retreat, canceling the sale and issuing apologies. Its reputation for cultural stewardship momentarily tarnished by the pursuit of trendy revenue. This clash was not merely about one failed project. It was a symptom of a profound disconnect. The traditional art world operates on a timescale of decades, with value accruing through slow consensus, scholarly validation, and meticulous curation. The NFT market, by contrast, moved at the speed of the internet, with value dictated by viral hype, community sentiment, and speculative trading. When these two worlds collided, the results were often awkward, if not disastrous. Another glaring example came when a major auction house, having successfully sold Beeple's historic collage, made a series of subsequent, highly publicized acquisitions of prominent NFT artworks for its own corporate collection. The purchases were touted as a visionary embrace of the digital future. However, when the crypto winter descended and the floor prices of those very NFTs plummeted by 90% or more, the institution faced widespread ridicule. Financial commentators and art critics alike gleefully pointed to the losses as proof of the market's fundamental emptiness, a multi-billion-dollar bubble popping in real time on the auction house's own balance sheet. The episode became a cautionary tale about the danger of traditional entities trying to play by new, volatile rules they did not fully comprehend. The institutional hesitation you see today, the wary sidelong glances from curators and directors, is a direct result of these very public stumbles. The scandals deepened a mutual distrust. From the NFT world's perspective, museums appeared as slow, greedy dinosaurs, either trying to profit from art they didn't create or foolishly gambling with endowment funds. From the museum's perspective, the NFT space looked like a lawless, speculative casino, devoid of the scholarly rigor and lasting cultural value that defined their mission. This standoff asks a difficult question about the future of art itself. Can these two worlds ever find a common language, or will the legacy of these early fiascos permanently wall off the digital avant-garde from the halls of institutional legitimacy? The answer may determine what and who gets remembered a century from now. The shimmering promise of digital wealth cast a long, dark shadow. As the NFT market soared, a devastating report landed like a bomb, shifting the scandal from financial fraud to ecological crisis. Investigative journalists and researchers began publishing staggering figures about the energy consumption of the very blockchains that powered most NFT transactions, particularly the Ethereum network, before its major upgrade. The process, known as proof of work, required a global network of powerful computers to solve complex mathematical puzzles, to validate transactions, and secure the network. This digital arms race consumed electricity on the scale of entire nations. A single NFT transaction on this old system could use more power than an average household does in a month. The abstract concept of a carbon footprint suddenly had a terrifyingly concrete form, measured in the coal burned and the greenhouse gases emitted to mint a cartoon ape. For many artists and collectors who had embraced NFTs as a progressive, forward-thinking movement, this was a profound moral reckoning. The very act of creating or collecting digital art was now implicated in the climate emergency. A wave of artist boycotts followed. Prominent digital creators publicly announced they would halt all NFT releases, stating they could not in good conscience contribute to such an enormous environmental cost. The backlash reached the celebrity promoters who had championed the space. Paris Hilton, who had been a vocal advocate, faced a torrent of criticism online. She and others were forced to issue public apologies and statements, clarifying their support was for the technology's potential future, not its polluting present. This was not a scandal of stolen money, but of stolen future, a crisis of conscience that threatened to unravel the entire cultural legitimacy of the NFT ecosystem. The industry faced an existential threat. In response, a frantic pivot began. The rallying cry became sustainability. Marketplaces rushed to highlight artists using greener alternative blockchains that employed a different system called proof of stake, which uses a tiny fraction of the energy. New platforms were built from the ground up with eco-friendly claims as their primary marketing feature. The community split into factions, debating the true scale of the problem and the sincerity of the solutions. This environmental scandal forced a technological reckoning that financial fraud never could. It asked every participant a deeply uncomfortable question: what is the true cost of digital ownership when the price is paid by the planet? The pressure became so intense it ultimately catalyzed Ethereum's historic shift, known as the merge, where the entire network transitioned from proof of work to proof of stake, slashing its energy use by over 99% overnight. That monumental change was driven not by market efficiency, but by a scandal that exposed the dirty secret behind the digital gold. The environmental reckoning was a crisis of conscience, but the financial reckoning arrived with the force of a tidal wave. The scandals within the NFT art world were merely a symptom of a far greater disease infecting the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem. In the autumn of 2022, the entire digital asset market began to implode, and the tremors shattered the gilded frames of even the most expensive NFTs. This was not about rug pulls or insider trading anymore. It was about the catastrophic failure of the very institutions that had propped up the market, revealing that the digital art boom was built on a foundation of sand. Two names came to define the collapse: the crypto exchange FTX and the hedge fund Three Arrows Capital. Their downfalls were not isolated events. They were interlinked detonations that vaporized tens of billions of dollars in value almost overnight. FTX, once hailed as the most trustworthy and sophisticated crypto exchange, was revealed to be a house of cards. Its founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, was accused of orchestrating a massive fraud, secretly using customer deposits to fund risky bets at his trading firm, Alameda Research. When those bets went bad, a liquidity crunch turned into a panic. And FTX froze withdrawals before filing for bankruptcy, locking millions of users out of their funds. Simultaneously, the giant hedge fund Three Arrows Capital, which had made enormous leveraged bets on the crypto market, was being liquidated by a court in the British Virgin Islands after failing to meet margin calls. These were not niche players. They were the pillars of the crypto financial system, and their simultaneous collapse created a devastating chain reaction. The liquidity crisis they triggered was immediate and brutal. As these giants fell, they were forced to sell anything of value to cover their debts. This included vast portfolios of blue-chip NFTs. The hedge fund Three Arrows Capital had been a major player in the digital art space, known for its extravagant purchases. In the frantic scramble for cash, their bankruptcy administrators began liquidating these holdings at fire sale prices on the open market. Imagine the shockwave that rippled through the community when rare and iconic NFTs from collections like CryptoPunks and art blocks, once held as trophy assets by a financial titan, suddenly flooded the marketplace at steep discounts. This was a forced sell-off of epic proportions, a tidal wave of supply crashing into a market where confidence and demand had just evaporated. The psychological impact was as damaging as the financial one. If the smart money was dumping its prized digital art in a panic, what did that say about the asset's underlying value? The fear was contagious, triggering a stampede for the exits. The connection was undeniable and humbling. The NFT art market, for all its talk of being a revolutionary new frontier, was utterly dependent on the health of the broader and deeply flawed crypto financial system. The same speculative greed, reckless leverage, and lack of transparency that doomed FTX and Three Arrows Capital were the very forces that had inflated the NFT bubble in the first place. The digital art world had imagined itself as a separate cultural economy. But when the giants of crypto finance caught a cold, the NFT market got pneumonia. High-profile collectors and projects that had ties to these failing entities saw their fortunes wiped out overnight. The floor prices of major collections plunged by 80, 90, sometimes 95%. A Bored Ape that sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars at the peak was now struggling to find a buyer for $20,000. The crash laid bare a painful truth. The value of these digital assets was not anchored in timeless artistic merit, but in the volatile flows of speculative capital. When that capital vanished, so did the illusion of permanence. The great crypto winter had arrived, and in its freezing silence, the entire ecosystem was forced to confront what, if anything, had been built to last. Yet from the wreckage of these scandals, an unexpected hero emerged, not from a regulatory agency, but from the community itself. The era of the NFT detective had begun. In a landscape where law enforcement was often playing catch-up, a new breed of investigator took matters into their own hands. These were anonymous or pseudonymous sleuths who wielded the blockchain not for profit, but for justice, turning the very transparency that enabled scams into a powerful tool for exposure. The most famous of these figures is known online as Zach XBD. Operating behind a simple cartoon avatar, he is not a police officer or a federal agent, but a self-taught blockchain analyst. His method is meticulous and public. He painstakingly traces the flow of stolen funds across thousands of digital wallet addresses, following the digital breadcrumbs that fraudsters leave behind as they attempt to launder their loot through various crypto exchanges and mixing services. Using open source tools and forensic blockchain explorers, he can often connect anonymous wallet addresses to real-world social media profiles, email addresses, or even corporate entities, piecing together the hidden identities behind the scams. His work is not done in secret. It is published in long, detailed Twitter threads and blog posts that read like thrilling detective novels, complete with irrefutable evidence laid out for all to see. One of his most significant investigations exposed a sprawling network of fraudulent influencers and projects, alleging they had collectively scammed their followers out of tens of millions of dollars. He named names, linked wallets, and provided a masterclass in how hype was being systematically weaponized for theft. The impact of this grassroots accountability is profound. A single thread from ZachXBT can instantly tank the reputation of a project, warning potential investors before they lose their money. In some cases, his public doxing of scammers has led to real-world consequences, with subjects facing community ostracization, loss of employment, or even becoming targets of law enforcement inquiries. This community-led justice creates a powerful, though imperfect, deterrent. The knowledge that a dedicated army of amateur sleuths is watching every transaction introduces a new layer of risk for would-be fraudsters. Their greatest shield, anonymity, can become their greatest vulnerability in the face of relentless on-chain analysis. But this system has clear limits. These detectives have no legal authority. They cannot arrest anyone or seize stolen funds. Their power lies solely in public shaming in the court of online opinion. Furthermore, their work is often thankless and fraught with risk, facing legal threats and harassment from the very criminals they expose. Yet, the rise of the NFT detective represents a fascinating evolution, a decentralized response to decentralized crime. It proves that in the absence of traditional guardians, the community can sometimes police itself, armed with nothing but curiosity, persistence, and an immutable ledger. It is a fragile, digital-age version of a neighborhood watch, shining a light into the dark corners of the new Gilded Age and asking, if the system will not protect us, who will? The community watchdogs could expose the scams, but only governments could truly enforce the law. As the scale of fraud became impossible to ignore, a regulatory storm began gathering on the horizon. Around the world, financial watchdogs and law enforcement agencies shifted from curious observation to aggressive action, determined to bring order to the digital chaos. The United States took a leading role with two powerful agencies spearheading the charge. The Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, began scrutinizing NFT projects with a critical new question: are these digital collectibles actually unregistered securities? This is not just legal jargon. It is a fundamental distinction with enormous consequences. Under American law, a security is an investment contract where someone gives money to a common enterprise with the expectation of profits solely from the efforts of others. If an NFT is marketed not as a piece of art for appreciation, but as a financial instrument with a promised roadmap, token rewards, and a team driving its value, it starts to look a lot like a security. The SEC has already launched investigations into several major NFT creators and marketplaces, probing whether they violated securities laws by selling these assets without proper registration and disclosures. This legal pressure forces a dramatic rethink of how projects are promoted, moving away from promises of future riches and toward the inherent value of the artwork itself. Simultaneously, the Department of Justice has stood up dedicated national cryptocurrency enforcement teams. These are not general prosecutors dabbling in digital assets. They are specialized units staffed with experts who understand blockchain tracing, smart contracts, and the unique mechanics of crypto fraud. Their mandate is broad, targeting everything from simple rug pulls to complex money laundering schemes that use NFTs to wash illicit funds. We have already seen this new muscle in action with the prosecutions of the Frosties and Mutant Ape Planet founders, but the charges are expanding beyond fraud. Authorities are now bringing cases for tax evasion, as collectors fail to report massive NFT sales as capital gains, and for money laundering, where stolen crypto is funneled through high-value digital art purchases to obscure its origin. This global regulatory wave is not confined to America. The European Union is pioneering sweeping legislation known as MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, which aims to create a unified rulebook for the entire 27-nation bloc. This framework would impose strict licensing requirements on NFT marketplaces, mandate clear disclosures for investors, and establish robust anti-money laundering checks. Asian financial hubs like Singapore and Hong Kong are also crafting their own regulatory regimes, seeking to protect investors while still attracting blockchain innovation. The core challenge for every regulator is the same. How do you protect people from predators without crushing the creative, decentralized spirit that made this space compelling in the first place? Effective regulation likely lies in a nuanced approach, distinguishing between a pure digital artwork and a financialized project with investment promises. It means enforcing basic rules against fraud and market manipulation that have existed for decades, just applied to new technology. It could involve requiring clear, standardized disclosures about project founders, fund allocation, and the rights attached to an NFT. The goal is not to ban innovation, but to build guardrails on the digital highway, ensuring that the next wave of artists and builders can operate in a space where trust is possible, and where the only thing at risk is the merit of an idea, not the integrity of the entire system. This regulatory reckoning signals that the digital Gilded Ages era of pure anarchy is closing. The question that remains is whether the new rules will foster a renaissance of responsible creativity, or simply send the next revolution underground. The real mystery is not how these scams worked, but why so many of us were so eager to believe. Beneath the code and the cryptocurrency lies a timeless story of human psychology, a perfect storm of biases that fraudsters have exploited for centuries. At the heart of it all is a primal, powerful force, the fear of missing out, or FOMO. In the NFT boom, this wasn't just a feeling, it was a visible, ticking clock. You would watch a project's Discord server fill with thousands of members in a single day. You would see the public mint counter on a website click down as digital assets sold out in minutes. The price charts on marketplaces would show a line shooting straight upward. This created an unbearable pressure, a visceral sense that if you did not act right now, you would be left behind, forever locked out of a new digital aristocracy. The evolved apes and frosties scams mastered this trigger, creating artificial urgency that overrode rational caution. This fear is then supercharged by social proof. When a celebrity like Jake Paul or Snoop Dogg endorses a project, it acts as a powerful mental shortcut. Our brains interpret it as all these people I admire are doing this, so it must be safe, it must be smart. We outsource our due diligence to their fame. The same dynamic played out in manic online communities. We're seeing hundreds of excited messages in a Discord chat created an echo chamber of validation, making skepticism feel like disloyalty to the group. The promise of quick, effortless wealth completes the trap. The stories were everywhere. The college student who turned a few $100s into $1 million by flipping a bored ape. The artist who achieved financial freedom overnight. This narrative taps into a deep-seated desire to bypass the traditional, slow grind of building wealth. It reframes a speculative gamble as a savvy, forward-thinking investment, a ticket to a new economic reality. Finally, complexity becomes the scammer's greatest shield. The technical jargon of blockchain, smart contracts, and cryptocurrency wallets is intimidating. For many newcomers, this complexity created a fog, making it difficult to even know what questions to ask. Red flags hidden in a project's poorly written smart contract code or a vague, jargon-filled roadmap were easily dismissed or simply missed. This is not a new pattern. It is the oldest playbook in finance, simply dressed in new digital clothes. The tulip mania in 17th century Holland saw ordinary people trade homes for single flower bulbs based on speculative frenzy. The dot-com bubble of the late 1990s witnessed billions poured into companies with no profits. Just a compelling story about the future of the internet. In each case, the same psychological drivers were at work. FOMO, social proof from early investors getting rich, the allure of a new paradigm creating unimaginable wealth, and a technological complexity that few truly understood. The NFT scandals are merely the latest chapter in this enduring story, proving that while the technology evolves, human nature remains beautifully, tragically predictable. So where does that leave us now after the fever broke? The once deafening roar of the NFT marketplace has settled into a quieter, more sober hum. Trading volumes, which once measured in the billions of dollars each week, have collapsed by over 90% from their peak. The frantic 24/7 minting of new projects has slowed to a trickle. For many looking in from the outside, this silence can only mean one thing: NFT art is dead. A fad that flamed out in a spectacular burst of fraud and foolishness. But to declare its death is to misunderstand what actually survived the purge. The scandals did not destroy the concept. They incinerated the worst of its excesses. What remains is a market that has been brutally humbled. And in that humility, there are signs of a healthier, if far more cautious, future. The most telling shift is in language. The word utility has replaced moonshot as the holy grail. Collectors are no longer swayed by vague promises of metaverse yachts. They ask hard questions. What does this token actually do? Does it grant access to a real, ongoing community or event? Does it provide a tangible benefit, like a share of royalties or a physical product? Projects that survive are those built less like speculative tokens and more like layered memberships, where the art is the key, not the entire treasure. And community, the genuine human connection between artists and collectors, has become the ultimate utility. The most resilient projects are those where people gather not just to discuss floor prices, but to collaborate, create, and support each other's work. This new focus has allowed a handful of blue-chip collections, most notably the Bored Ape Yacht Club, to endure. Their value is no longer just about rarity. It is about the ecosystem they built, the real-world events they host, and the persistent cultural footprint they maintain. They are digital Soho houses that survived the recession. For artists, the landscape is paradoxically clearer. The get-rich-quick speculators have largely fled, leaving space for genuine creators who see NFTs as a tool, not a lottery ticket. These artists are building sustainable careers, connecting directly with patrons, and using the technology for what it does best, proving provenance and automating royalties. The scandals, in a cruel way, performed a necessary cleansing. They exposed the rot, scared off the purely greedy, and forced everyone still standing to answer a fundamental question. Are you here for the art or just the money? The market that exists today is smaller, wiser, and far less shiny. It is a market being built by artists and collectors who lived through the crash and carry its scars. They approach each new project with a healthy skepticism, armed with the hard-won knowledge of how things can go wrong. This is not the explosive, revolutionary boom of 2021. It is the slow, steady work of rebuilding trust, brick by digital brick. The dream of a new creative economy is not dead, but it has traded its golden parachute for a hard hat. The question for the future is whether this quieter, more thoughtful version can ever capture the world's imagination again, or if it will remain a passionate niche, forever shadowed by the spectacular sins of its gilded youth. The dust has settled on the most explosive boom and bust in art history. From the silent heist of evolved apes to the celebrity-fueled wreckage of Crypto Zoo, we have navigated a landscape where ambition curdled into fraud at a breathtaking scale. We witnessed insider trading poison the well at the largest marketplace, saw influencers turn trust into a trap, and watched as cultural symbols and environmental concerns were trampled in the rush for profit. This was not merely a series of bad investments. It was the birth of a modern Gilded Age, playing out on blockchain ledgers instead of railroad tracks. Once again, staggering new wealth collided with a frontier mentality, creating a perfect environment for timeless human vices to reinvent themselves in digital form. The technology was novel, but the stories were ancient, tales of greed, deception, and the fragile nature of trust when money moves faster than wisdom. The legacy of this era is a cautionary one, written in lost fortunes and broken promises. It teaches us that no matter how revolutionary the tool, it is ultimately wielded by people, with all our brilliance and all our flaws. The promise of a decentralized creative future remains, but its path forward is now paved with the hard lessons of a speculative mania. We want to hear from you. Did you experience this digital gold rush firsthand? Share your own stories or thoughts on these scandals in the comments below. If you found this journey through the crossroads of art, technology, and human nature compelling, subscribe for more deep dives into the dramatic moments where history, money, and power violently collide.